good morning again, and thank you so much for joining this session, which we all believe it's going to be a very interesting one. So we're very glad you are here. This is the step-by-step towards climate resilience. Is the second open training session that we are doing in Resilience, and it's really nice to have you here. Before we start, I just want to tell you a bit who I am. So maybe if we go to the next slide. So my name is Jen Heemann. I work at the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policies, which is based in the Netherlands, but I'm actually speaking for you from Portugal, which is rainy today, believe it or not. It was quite sunny. And I'm going to moderate the session. I don't want to spend much time more talking about myself because what is interesting is yet to come. So let's go first and have a look at the housekeeping rules before we go into the agenda and we explain a bit more about the session today. So as you probably have noticed, as soon as you come in, your microphones are off because, we want to avoid background noise during presentations and the speakers. But of course, we're going to have these Q&A sessions during the agenda today. And during the Q&A, we would prefer to read the questions that are already there in Slido. So you will see above there's an icon for Slido that you can click. And during presentations, you can already start typing your questions there. So during the Q&A, when I'm going to read the questions, if someone who wrote the question would like to elaborate, you will be able to talk a bit further. You just need to raise your hand, and then we can allow the microphone. To disable it to be able to speak. As I mentioned before, but many of you were not here, you can put your camera on if you have a good connection and also if you feel comfortable about it, because this meeting is being recorded at the moment. So if you don't feel comfortable in showing your face, then of course you can turn your camera off. And I think that would be all. So from the slide, just to mention, I'm gonna pass the ball to Matthias, my colleague, in a few minutes. But you can see the icon above, and I hope it works for everyone. So maybe before we start the session officially, let's go to the next slide, Matthias, because I would like to explain a bit how the session is organized. So in Resilience, I hope you all know, but Resilience is a project funded by the European Commission, and it supports the European Green Deal and the EU mission adaptation to climate change by fostering the adoption of regional climate resilience development pathways. So what we do is we develop, compile, share, and promote tools and scientific knowledge that can help, these European regions to address their climate risks. And we work a lot with the sister projects such as Arsinoe, Impetus, and Transformar. Transformar is here today to present the playbook. And we also support 7 vulnerable regions in Europe that have insufficient resources to deal with the climate risk they are facing. So this open training session is one of the activities we are performing in Resilience, and it has 2 cycles. So the first one, which is the cycle we are now, you will see there are 4 sessions. We are in the second one, which is highlighted. And then we're going to ask you at the end of the meeting today to vote for the topics of the second cycle, which is going to be more technical oriented and focused sessions. So, and we, of course, would love to hear your opinion on the topics that could be highlighted in the second cycle. So you will be able to vote at the end of the session today, but also on Resilience website. And I think that's enough. So let's go to the next slide on the agenda today. So as you know, we are having now the welcome and introduction. And by the way, I didn't mention, but IEECP, I'm wearing 2 hats as a moderator, but also I'm the project coordinator for Resilience. So IEECP has this role. And so here we started the introduction, and then we're going to have my colleague Josipa presenting the principles and practices of transformational pathways, which is a work that has been developed in Resilience project. And then we're going to have a presentation by Lucy and Linda on the adaptation support tool, focus on regions. And then we're going to have a session of questions and answers after these 2 presentations. And then we're going to have the presentation on the playbook developed in Transformar project on resilient pathway development by Philip and Lynn. And we're going to hear two users of the playbook, Gilles and Amaya, on how it's working on the regions. And then another moment for questions and answers. And then, of course, we have a small conclusion of the session today. So maybe we can start already, and I'll pass the ball to Matthias. Maybe if you want to present this Slido and also present yourself briefly, that would be great.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Matthias Watzak-Helmer. I'm working for Verein, and I'm also part of the Resilience team, and I'm leading the activities on the capacity building within Verein and with Resilience project. And today I want to thank Jen for leading the moderation and giving us, and we have a lot of very interesting speakers today, so I'm really curious about it. So I will not take much longer and start to introduce the Slido session. The session should be available via the Teams channel, but if you have troubles, you can also connect let's say the normal way online on slido.com and enter either the number or scan the presentations. And I'm not sure if Jen wants to introduce. Back to you,
Yeah.
Jen.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So, okay, let's start with the interesting presentations that we have today. So we have here Josipa Arapovic. I'm sorry, Josipa, I hope I pronounced it correctly. She's a project manager at REGIA, and her presentation is based on the Resilience report that provides valuable insights into how regions can create sustainable, resilient, and transformative pathways to achieve their goals. The presentation will highlight the key findings and recommendations from the report, and also she will share some examples of how these principles and practices have been applied in real-world context. So, Josipa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jen. Just give me a second until I share my screen. And until I pull up my presentation, just let me know once you see the full slide.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you, Jen, again for the wonderful introduction. So as Jen has said, my name is Josipa Arapovic, which is very hard to pronounce for some people, I guess. And I'm a project manager at REGIA, which is a regional energy and climate agency here in Croatia. It's great to be here today and to have the opportunity to share with you some of the insights that we gained and gathered from the Resilience project while working on the practices for implementing transformational pathways for climate resilience. I hope that today's presentation can spark some valuable insights and meaningful conversations later on, especially in the Q&A section, about how we can all work together to achieve transformational change for climate resilience. Again, I look forward to the discussion, and I'll start with the presentation itself. I mean, as we all know, the climate change is a complex and urgent issue that requires a collaborative action and systemic change. The journey towards triggering transformational changes in response to climate change relies on several key factors that are necessary to achieve this transformational change. One of them is resilience, which is exactly what the Resilience Project is talking about. So I'll just briefly go over, I know most of you have been introduced to the Resilience Project, but just briefly to reiterate that our project facilitates the identification and upscaling of the most promising resilience solutions in 10 vulnerable and low capacity regions in Europe, aiming to develop different kinds of tools and solutions for the regions to use and to apply in their real life and real work settings. The objective of the project is to be the front runners for the EU mission called the Climate Resilient Europe, which will by 2030 aims to provide all regions with access to climate risk profiles, supporting 200 regions in developing transformative vision, adaptation pathways and tested solutions, and building deep demonstrators to trigger societal transformation across borders. But without further ado, I want to talk specifically about the principles and practices of transformational pathways, which is the topic of my presentation today. So what exactly are transformational pathways? Well, they're comprehensive, integrated, and long-term strategies that aim to achieve a transformative change towards a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future. This means that they involve rethinking existing systems, rethinking existing structures and norms, and exploring new ways of how things are done. So transformational pathways are based on a number of key principles, which include systemic thinking and analysis, inclusive and participatory decision-making, collaboration and partnership building, innovation, experimentation, and continuous learning and adaptation. These principles help to ensure that the transformational pathways are effective, inclusive, and sustainable over the long term. So how to actually begin transforming without just basically using all these fancy words of collaboration and everything? How can it be done in practice? So as we said, reaching climate resilience is not an easy accomplishment, and it definitely requires a collaborative action and understanding of different kinds of interdependencies between the impacts of our actions and between the change that occurs, specifically regional change in this context. So what is really important to achieve transformational change is it's necessary to reduce risk and vulnerability, to challenge systems and structures, to reshape the way our economic and social relations are made, and our behaviors towards contributing to climate change and social vulnerability. What is really important is to base all of this on previous practices and lessons learned, using their existing examples, so that past lessons learned can be used for upcoming new experiences. This is also something that we have done within the deliverable, the report that we were making within the project is we surveyed, we interviewed different projects across the board, across all of the regions that we are working on in Europe, and asked them what has been the most transformative transformative impact in their own project, specifically also focusing on the drivers for change, so the good things, the good impacts that occurred, and also barriers to those solutions. By using these examples, we can set an overview of what has worked well and what hasn't worked well in order to make some sort of guidance for upcoming projects, what to do and what not to do while using climate resilience projects in the future. So what is very important is, as we said, using previous practices and lessons learned on existing examples, using a reflexive practice, adaptive management between different kinds of actors, so including all of the stakeholders that are to be involved. Knowledge and experience sharing is vital. It's a using common holistic databases between broader sets of stakeholders within regions. That is what we saw as paramount to achieve successful transformational change. Transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches are also required for transformative adaptation, which is where practitioners, people on the field, researchers, policymakers, all citizens and institutions that are doing the work are all working together to enable positive social, institutional, and governance change. So this is something that drives the transformative process, this collaborative approach. But also keeping in mind that approach needs to be flexible, experience-based, location-based also, because it's not the same using experiences coming from, let's say, France to Greece, Croatia, or different countries that exist. And not all experiences are the same, or all locations are the same. But it's also important to use multi-sectoral approach, including diverse set of actors, and also long-term planning. Those are some of the approaches that we saw are crucial and are needed for successful adaptation. So, as I've said, we have good news that we have identified some of the key drivers that can help us and help you to achieve successful transformational change while you're working in response to climate change. First and foremost, this is just a set of lists, but also it's coming from experience, as I've said, serving, interviewing, workshopping with different actors on the field, and using their collective experiences to set a list of drivers for success and what needs to be implemented in order to use and take specific and crucial actions. So first and foremost, we need to mobilize resources and have a supportive institutional environment to make decisions and to take actions. What is needed also is using adaptive management and collaborative approach, as I've said, involving diverse stakeholders, ensuring that we have that we are learning from our experiences, but also from past experiences from different projects. Having a dedicated, sorry. I skipped way too quickly to other slides. Having a dedicated lead institution for the processes and for capacity building for different stakeholders. This is also very important for driving the success of a project. Having participatory approaches, this is also vital in meaning that we need to evolve a wide range of stakeholders in decision-making processes as well, not just the passive spectator of the project. Finally, we also need to ensure that we have sufficient funding, successful communication, dissemination and synthesis of all of this knowledge and information, which should be and can be used for the future, as well as the monitoring and evaluation system in place. Some of the things that we have mentioned here, that I have mentioned here, also exist as a set of tools, which I will talk later on, which have already been developed within the Resilience project. I'm simply giving it an overview of what is needed and what is essential to achieve successful transformational change. So it's essential to have these drivers for success: mobilization of resources, supportive institutional environment, adaptive management, synthesis of knowledge, good management plan, sufficient funding, and as we said, monitoring and evaluation systems. However, without being at all positive, we also have some identified some key barriers that can hinder our ability to achieve this successful transformation. But now that you know what the drivers are for successful transformation, there is also, now you know also what the barriers are and how you can avoid those specific barriers within your projects and within your works to actually have a more smooth implementation of all your works. So institutional fragmentation and cooperation difficulties can be major challenges, as the lack of efficient knowledge and informational dissemination and communication. So the uncertainty that exists between the lack of cooperation between different institutions most often was shown as a sign of lacking of implementation or something that was troubling and hindering the success, as we said. The uncertainty in the requirements and the uncertainty in the urgency of climate change is also one of the key barriers that has shown in our research or from the practice field, as well as the lack of focus on climate change adaptation measures alongside mitigation actions, which also was shown as a significant barrier. Additionally, solid funding practice for successful adaptation cases and demonstration of effectiveness is also something that needs to improve. So funding practice for successful projects is necessary, but also demonstration of effectiveness and accountability. It's important that we recognize these barriers. These are just some of them that occur in the span of a project's life, but also so we can work on them and overcome them to achieve successful transformational change. In order to do so, we need to improve and renew our governance structure, include governments, include NGOs, include interdisciplinary approaches, involving practitioners, policymakers, citizens. Everything needs to be flexible, experience-based, and multi-sectoral for successful adaptation. But not just to talk all of this, let's say, dry talk. We have pulled all of this example, as I've said, from different kinds of practices that have been implemented in real-world contexts. So, for example, we've used the context of the systemic mapping and analysis, which we use to identify leverage points for change in Zagreb, Croatia. So also the implementation of good management plan was something that came up while talking with the municipality of Ober-Gradendorf in Lower Austria, where they have actually used participatory approach. The municipality engaged the community and set up a monitoring and evaluation system, which proved to be key in their successful implementation. For example, the formation of multi-sectoral partnerships in Catalonia, in Spain, that they use to address the challenges of climate change adaptation, and also including transversal stakeholders. There was a case in Turin, Italy, which involved the success factor of trainings, but also insurance companies and public-private partnerships involving insurers, local authorities, and small and medium enterprises. They use that to develop trainings and involve the community in decision-making processes. And also, one of the examples was also the establishment of monitoring and evaluation frameworks in Spain, where they use that to synthesize all of the knowledge that exists and that existed previously, to use that for adaptive management approach in their project. So as I've mentioned, Resilience has created several different tools that can be used to use for climate resilience and to avoid any barriers for success. So you have on the website of Resilience already a tool for maladaptation, information about resilience funding, financing, open training sessions such as this one, and many other reports that came out of the project. Here on the slides, you will find a scan that leads you to the website where you can find all of the resources that I've mentioned, but also this report if you would like to take a look at it. So to conclude, the principles and practices outlined in the report and everything that I have summarized here today provide a valuable guidance for creating sustainable resilience and transformative pathways, so that you and all of us can achieve desired outcomes to their projects and to actually combat climate change. Only by taking this sort of holistic and collaborative approach that involves diverse stakeholders is that we can address complex challenges and create ultimately a better future for all. I encourage you to further explore the reports, further explore all of the tools that we have available on our website, and get some insights and learn more on how to implement the practices in your own work. So that's all from me, and thank you for your attention. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Josipa. That was quite interesting presentation, and it's good to see that although we have many barriers on the way, there are also examples on how to we can do that. We can achieve this transformational change that we need. I see this little here, but I think We are going to the next session now. Yeah, now I don't see this Lido anymore. So, well, now we're going to see another tool, the adaptation support tool. And I invite Lucy Gregerson and Linda Romanovska to present. So Lucy is an expert on mission and adaptation to climate change at the European Environment Agency. And Linda is a senior policy expert on adaptation to climate change at Fresh Thoughts Consulting. She has been working on climate change adaptation for almost 15 years. And she was one of the contributors to the very first EU strategy on climate change. She also has co-authored 7 EEA reports on various adaptation-related topics. So Linda and Lucy, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Lucy Gregerson, and I work for the European Environment Agency, as Jen kindly presented. I hope you can hear me. I will just share my screen in one.
Yes, I just want to confirm that I can hear you.
Great.
Let's see the screen if it works well.
Are you seeing the screen? The
Yes.
full presentation mode? Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Hi again, everyone. So yes, I'm Lucy Gregerson, working for the European Environment Agency, where I sit within the Climate Change Impacts and Adaptation Unit, where our role in the day-to-day is to provide actionable knowledge on climate change hazards and impacts to policymakers in EU, support key EU policies and initiatives such as the adaptation strategy and the mission on adaptation, which is my daily bread and butter in the agency. And then also development and implementation of adaptation strategies, also at the subnational level. So today I will give a little bit of an introduction to the adaptation support tool hosted within the Climate Adapt platform, and then also a little bit more on the EA's role in relation to Climate Adapt and the AST tool itself. So I would like to start with first introducing Climate Adapt to those that may not know it yet. It was launched in 2012, and it is jointly managed by the European Commission and the EEA, and also supported by the European Topic Centre on Climate Change Adaptation and LULUCF. The aim with Climate Adapt is to support organisations to prepare and implement adaptation policies and actions, and it provides really a one-stop shop in a structured way, web content accessible from this top bar, and covers policy information at multiple governance scales. So you will find some good things in there for the regional and local scale, and also provides a wide variety of tools and guides, news and events to stay up to date on what is happening in the European Union on adaptation. So Climate Adapt has a very specific role to play for the EU adaptation strategy, which was published in 2013. And in relation to this, Climate Adapt is specifically aiming to support decision-making at all levels on adaptation in Europe. So to find the adaptation support tool within Climate Adapt, this is a screenshot of what it will look like. If you go in under the knowledge bar and choose adaptation support tool. The adaptation support tool is really the main guideline process for practitioners and users to design their adaptation process and strategies. It is a stepwise approach. So it starts from preparing the ground on adaptation, assessing and finding the hazards and impacts, and then going all the way to implementation of actions and the monitoring and evaluation process. The tool is also used in the reporting process that the member states of the EEA are obliged to do. So there are a number of other tools built into Climate Adapt and the AST itself that are complementary information both towards national services as well as localized knowledge. Within the Climate Adapt platform, it is one of the most used features because it really does provide key reference for guidance regarding adaptation at EU levels, It has complements to the specific national and subnational tools. It has annual regular updates as well as ad hoc updates for key knowledge developments. I think the last overall update of the AST was in early autumn, summer of last year, and it's just due for a next one soon. But yes, to go a little bit into the Climate Adapt tool and how it provides access to additional relevant knowledge for all the steps of the adaptation policy cycles. Now, the red lines here are a little bit of simplification of what information is referred to in the AST. There is an awful lot more. But for example, at preparing the ground for adaptation, if you are a local authority or city authority practitioner, there is an entry point into an urban adaptation support tool. When you are assessing your risks and vulnerability, there's an entry point into the European Climate and Data Explorer, which accesses Copernicus climate change and climate impact data within wide EU coverage. And you can also delve into more technical descriptions of different adaptation options. There's also case studies illustrating the actual implementation of adaptation options across governance scales. So there really is a lot of things to dive into. I'm not going to go too much into detail because that will be Linda coming after me. In terms of the broader scoping of the adaptation support tools, the main adaptation support tool, or also known as the national one, covers the national level reporting because it does function as reporting guidelines, as I said, for EEA member states. On the other side, we do have the urban adaptation support tool, which was developed with the main goal of targeting cities and local authorities. And under the banner of the mission on adaptation, the EA has a role also to develop inputs for regional information on climate risks, as well as guidelines and tools. So to sort of understand complementary developments that are coming to the adaptation support tool, we also have a regional adaptation support tool developed under the context of the mission on adaptation. Now it's still under development, but there is a placeholder for it to come up in June under the recently published mission portal. The mission portal is a subsite to Climate Adapt that provides information about the mission and the latest developments regarding its delivery, including research projects, as well as the charter signatories. Yeah, I just wanted to give this little teaser on the variety of the adaptation support tool, complementary database and information built within it, and broadly on the Climate Adapt platform. There are also a couple of extra slides in my presentation that I have just added but not presented now because they contain useful links for anyone who wants to go a little bit further after the training. So thank you so much, and that's all from me for now. Sorry, I had turned off my video because my connection was a bit unstable.
Thank you, Lucy. And I believe Linda would like to present now.
Yes, thank you. While I'm opening the window and sharing the tool, you could remind me how much time do we have left for the session so I can calibrate.
We have 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thanks for inviting me to speak today to all of you. I would start with a little bit of history and some of the reasoning behind Climate Adapt portal and this tool, because I think it's really interesting to understand the context of where this idea of having such a tool in the first place came from, and also what were the initial thoughts and how this tool was developed. The reason why I can be talking about this is that I did have the luck to be participating in the very first development process of the very first strategy on adaptation for the EU. And that strategy was adopted in 2013. The Climate Adapt portal, as you already heard from Lucy's presentation, came online earlier than that. So that means that the portal was developed in parallel with that strategy development process. And I had the chance to be participating or contributing to both processes at the same time. And it was clear that the climate data portal was a very high priority. It was being brought online even before the strategy itself was adopted, because it was very clear early on in the European Commission at that time that we will need one-stop shop, or the one place, the one source of truth, where every person in Europe, every professional, every citizen, every individual would be able to go and find all relevant information on climate change impacts, on risks and vulnerabilities, and also ways to adapt to those. And therefore, this portal really is very important in the broader context of adaptation in the EU, because it truly became this one-stop shop and truth for all adaptation information. Some of the thinking behind it was, for the whole portal, that it needs to be quality-driven. We can't just post any kind of information in this portal and expect it to be trusted. So one of the main principles in the development and management of it, which is largely supported by the Topic Center on adaptation, which was also mentioned by Lucy, is that we need to bring high-level adaptation experts to help manage this portal and also this tool, meaning that everything that you will find in this portal on every page, in the database, in every tool, is thoroughly quality checked and rechecked and revised by some of the best adaptation experts in Europe. I know some of them are on this call as well. I really welcome all the colleagues from the European Topic Center that I have been working together for many years and who continue to do this work. This is a really important work that they are doing in the background, very often not known to the larger public. So let's come to this tool. Where did this tool, the idea of this tool and the structure of this tool came from? It is largely based on one of the documents that formed the package on adaptation strategy in 2013. And in fact, in this page, we do see it right here, the Guidelines on Developing Adaptation Strategies. This was a guideline document that accompanied the overall strategy. And initially, it was targeted at helping member states in the EU to start developing their adaptation strategies. At that time, very few member states did have strategies or were working on them. Majority would not have started their strategies and would not have much understanding of how to do that. And therefore, European Commission developed these guidelines in parallel with developing the strategy and released them in 2013. This tool is largely based on these guidelines. Every step that you still see in this tool is the same as in these guidelines. And you would think that these guidelines were released in 2013. Surely they must have been outdated by now. However, I would argue that they are universal and timeless, especially in the structure, in the way they presented the process of adaptation and the overall structure of the adaptation process. And so while these guidelines cannot be regularly updated because it is a static document, what can be updated is an online tool. And it also would be more accessible to users. It will be more interactive. It can be made more adaptable, more flexible. And therefore, it was deemed important that these guidelines don't stay just in a document, but there is some sort of more attractive and engaging and more accessible way to explain to users in Europe what the process of adaptation look like and what the good practice looks like in a way that is provided by experts and quality checked. And this is how this tool came about. There's also, as Lucy mentioned, a sister tool. You can find all the tools here under Knowledge, under Tools. So you see all the tools that are there. And there is the Urban Adaptation Support Tool that is largely currently being maintained in collaboration with the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. So let me just talk you through some of the key features for those who may not have been using this tool so far. As I said, this tool is quality checked process tool, but at the same time, it's not a detailed set of guidance. The whole idea behind this tool was to give concise guidance. And instead of going into lengthy explanations and texts and providing all possible versions of methodologies, it would rather link to useful resources that are already available in the database of the portal, which can also be accessed here under Knowledge in and of its own. So the idea behind how to structure this tool is that you would first have a concise overview of the certain step in the adaptation process, but then you would be able to go in and explore quality checked and expert approved database items that provide you with further guidance, information, etc. And as Lucy mentioned, there are also additional resources that are linked to this tool, which usually lead to other pages in the portal or other information sources that are relevant here that are not necessarily database items. This is a good example in this page. For example, this page really simply gives you an introduction to the tool, but any person who would want to be starting on their adaptation, they would need to understand what is happening in their member country, for example. And therefore, it was deemed important that we add an additional resource here. If we click on it, and I have opened one of the pages here, you can go to a map and find a country. I know that majority of people were from France, so you would be able to go to France and find, for example, all relevant information that you would need to understand the context in which you operate if you operate in a certain country. So that explains the different elements that you see on the page. For each of these steps, you would also have another useful element. As you can see, all the different steps are broken down into sub-steps that you need to go through to implement your adaptation process. They are sequential. They are in the order in which they are recommended to be implemented. And at the end of each of the major steps, you would also have a little self-check tool, a little checklist that you can use in practice to track your progress or assess, make a self-assessment that you can do periodically or during the implementation process that helps you track and make sure that you actually are on track and you haven't skipped anything important and you have implemented it in a way that represents best practice. The key, I will not go through the different steps of adaptation process in high detail. We do not have the time for it. The key steps you can see here. You would always start with preparing the ground for adaptation. Rarely can you jump in straight into the implementation steps. You really need to set the ground. And when you look at some of the steps here described under preparing the ground, you will see that they coincide to a large extent to some of the principles for success that Josipa also outlined in her presentation. And that makes a lot of sense because you would need to set up yourself for success up front before you start your adaptation implementation process. And so going through these steps here under preparing the ground for adaptation, you are likely to set up in a way that then makes the rest of the process easier. For example, obtaining the high-level political support, that was one of the key points Josipa also outlined as key for successful implementation process. Successful communication, well-planned communication, raising awareness, etc. Having sufficient resources here, for example, estimating human and financial resources, and so on. It is really starting from the second step in this tool where you start the actual process of adaptation, starting with assessing your climate change risks and vulnerabilities, with all the different sub-steps that go into that. As you can see, here we're starting to have a little bit more text, a little bit more detail. It's starting to be more technical. And we also have a larger number of database items that are useful for the implementation of this step, and also a larger number of resources linked to it. The second step really starts with the preliminary understanding of your climate risks. You have to work through your methodologies for how you will be assessing impacts, vulnerabilities, and risks. You go through a general sequence. This is a key step of doing the assessment, through defining objectives, prioritizing, collecting information, carrying out the assessment itself. As you can see, this is a comparatively lengthy step as it is key. And then there are certain other sub-steps in here that complement this process. For example, how do you take transboundary issues into account, which can be highly relevant for anyone who's from a regional authority here? How do you address knowledge gaps, deal with uncertainties? And once you have gone through this, you will be able to identify your main adaptation concerns and set the strategic direction for it. At the end of it, again, you can go through your self-check, make sure that you have implemented all the above steps. Once you are in clear, you can proceed to identifying adaptation options. Adaptation options, adaptation measures, sometimes are used interchangeably. In essence, they mean one and the same. It is all the different activities that you can do to address and manage your climate change risks. And you start by identifying these options, creating a catalog of the ones that would be relevant to the specific risks that you have identified. You would be finding examples of good adaptation practices, not only theoretical, but also practical. Perhaps you want to look in similar regions, maybe peers, learn from use cases, cases where this already been implemented in practice. That is always very useful. If you have an opportunity to go and visit a place where this has been implemented, that can be also very useful. And then you describe these adaptation options in detail. And it is important to really understand in quite some detail each of the options, because you would need to then assess them. And to be able to assess them, you need a lot of information. Because when you will start assessing them, you will need to be assessing them based on different criteria. It can be based on their effectiveness, how good they are addressing the impact and reducing the risk. It can be cost-benefit assessment. Does the cost of the option outweigh or is more beneficial than non-action? And you can compare different options and different measures, or which of those perform better, both from technical performance level or effectiveness level, but also from economic level. You also assess social aspects of it. You assess in here also risks for maladaptation, whether any of these options would potentially lead to unintended negative outcomes. So this is a really crucial step, because if you miss some important information in understanding your options and then assessing them, you might end up with a set of actions that in one way or another either do not achieve an optimal adaptation outcome or lead to unintended consequences. Again, at the end of the step, a little self-check. And the really important step is the implementing adaptation step. Again, I will not go through in detail, but those of you who are familiar with adaptation will know that you always will need an adaptation action plan. You can't go far if you do not have a plan. You have to have a governance system organized around the implementation of this plan with clearly assigned responsibilities across all different governance levels and across all different sectors that would be involved in adaptation. You want to look at different ways of implementing adaptation, including mainstreaming, where you integrate adaptation into instruments and sector policies of other sectors, not always specifically those only related to climate change or adaptation. You have to take care around multi-level coordination, supportive governance framework. And once you have gone through this step, based on some of these success factors, you can be confident that your action that you have implemented on your plan have lived up to the requirements of good practice in this area. Monitoring and evaluation is always a very important step. Without this step, you would never know whether what you have done is effective, efficient, and has led to the intended outcomes. It is also an important step because on the basis of monitoring and evaluation outcomes, you will be also adapting your adaptation strategy and your plan. Adaptation generally is an iterative process. Why? Because information changes, the understanding of climate change risk changes, the level of climate change itself changes year on year. Some risks that you may have underestimated or overestimated in newer projections may have other risk levels. And on the basis of that, you need to continuously be monitoring whether what you are planning and what you're implementing still is adequate and still addresses your actual and projected risk level adequately. It also helps communicating your results and gaining support both on different policy and governance levels, but also from wider society. And of course, it also helps for being accountable in your jurisdictions, and if you are in policy making, also your constituencies and your voters. So this is a quick run through the different steps and also the different features of the tool. As I said, we do have fairly short time today to simply give you a quick demo of this. However, I hope this has inspired you to go to the tool and explore it in more detail. But before I stop, I would like to address one question that I hear very often from different players. And I know that there are quite a few of you who are from the private sector. And the private sector very often asks the question, well, but this is applicable to me, to a company, if I'm from private sector. And I would say yes, because this tool really is universal. It doesn't really matter whether you are trying to implement your adaptation action and first understand your risks and vulnerabilities and then implement adaptation action on a country level or regional level, city level, or company level. For cities, we do have a separate tool. For regions, we will have a separate tool in the near future. For private sector, if you would like to use this tool, there's nothing standing in your way. You can absolutely take this tool and apply it to your context. The specificity of private sector very often is that you would need to look beyond your immediate geographic area, and you would need to look upstream and downstream in your value chains. So your scope of what you are looking at and where you're looking for impacts and risks and also planning your actions may differ, but generally you would be following the exact same steps and using similar resources for this as well. Okay, so I hope this was a quick overview of the tool that gave you a quick insight, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucy and Linda, for this very good explanation on the tool and in the portal as well. We see it's quite interesting that we can see the clear steps we have to go through, and the checklist is also nice. So thank you so much for the presentation. I would like to invite the participants now. I don't know if you have started already writing your questions on the Q&A, but I'll pass the floor to Matthias so that he can quickly show some Slido questions that we have for you. And then while you're answering the Slido, you can also answer, type your questions on the Q&A session.
The first question would be, how regularly are the questions and resources in the adaptation support tool updated? Lucy or Linda?
My quick answer to that is continuously, but I'm sure there are other people who are doing it right now who are on the call who can comment on that as well.
Exactly. I can say the larger, sorry, Lucy here, the larger update, latest one was summer of last year, but database items and links and resources are updated on a more regular basis, monthly almost, if not more often.
Okay, the next question would be, how do you build in feedback from regions and other authorities? Is there a way how you get this feedback?
Let me see. Sorry, Linda, go ahead.
I wanted to give the word to Lucy on this, as I would think that she's the most best positioned.
Yes, I can. There's multiple ways. So in relation to, for example, the urban adaptation support tool, it's been developed together with the Covenant of Mayors, who have a vast membership of cities and regions which come input at the subnational level. But when it comes to national level for the adaptation support tool, the EEA has a network called the IONET, which is a network of national authorities from each EEA member state, where through exchanges and we collect a lot of information via this to keep the AST updated and also suited to national and localized needs. In relation to other exchanges, it was also mentioned earlier that really the EEA's job is also to provide a solid data and knowledge foundation. So as the AST functions as its reporting guideline, we do get a lot of information directly reported from EEA member states as well to help build it. Over.
Thank you. The next question would be, how can Climate Adapt be linked to other tools such as the playbook, which will be presented later? Lucy, do you want to
I think this is me again. On Climate Adapt, the most direct way is to submit your information. So Linda mentioned the Climate Adapt database, and one of the ways that we exchange with the users of the platform is that anybody is freely welcome to apply for an account, or just to send an email with a suggestion such as the playbook to be added to the database, whereafter it would go for review within the European Topic Center. And then once it's in the database, it can follow on suite into the adaptation support tool.
Thank you. And how are existing norms and regulations considered in the adaptation tool? Like the ISO 14091 or the CSRD for companies?
I might pass this one to Linda, as she has had a bit more experience on the development of the tool.
First of all of these guidances and international standards and so on, they feed into or fed into the guidelines that were developed for EU. Of course, some of these standards have been developed later. First of all, they are getting added to the database, as it is not only European materials that get added, but also some more global or international materials that would be relevant for users in Europe also get added into the database. So they would be linked, if deemed relevant, they could be linked to the different steps of the tool, or you can find them additionally in the database. By the way, when you go to the database, you can filter the database by adaptation cycle step. So you could go there and just click that you want to see only all materials that would relate to implementation, and there would be hundreds of material, while the tool itself only has a select resources that are linked to it that the experts found most useful. If you go to the database, you would find many more, and you would also see these standards in there. The information, however, in the standards would be integrated also when writing the text of the tool. So experts working on the tool, and also those who are regularly updated, they would be scanning the literature that's available and on all the latest thinking, including the latest IPCC reports, including the latest, most important guidances on adaptation, some of the latest thinking, for example, on social aspects, and so on. And that would be integrated in the tool as well. So it really is that's the expert work, and they do base their work on evidence.
Thank you, Linda. And I will read out the last question as well. It was said that there is the possibility for exchange on the Climate Adapt platform. Where and how is this exchange between actors possible? What's the question?
I can start with this one, I think. So exchange takes many forms. One is, for example, through the database item, where users can submit any content contributions and then can have feedback from the European topic centers on resources and links that go on the website. Other aspects are that there are a number of capacity building activities on Climate Adapt. So we do regular webinars and facilitate online exchanges between participants and speakers during webinars. In a new area of Climate Adapt, which is the Mission on Adaptation portal. So with today's regional focus, we do have other partners developing the mission portal together with the EEA and the Commission. And there will be a community of practice. Currently, registration, I think, is online to sort of, you can apply to become a participant in the community. But this is mainly handled by some other contributors to the mission portal. But web links to a number of the things mentioned will be in the slides that I presented, shared after. Thank you.
Maybe I will add, I think the person might have heard some previous considerations, because there have been historically some considerations that there should be either an open forum or some sort of more live interaction opportunity on the portal. However, that is very hard to implement, and it also would require a lot of resources, for example, for moderating this kind of tool. So although it has been considered in the past, it has been determined that it doesn't bring the most value to be integrated in the portal. And there are plenty of other ways to connect with other adaptation professionals. If you are a region or a city, then Global Covenant of Mayors, for example, offers you a lot of this kind of interaction, and many others. And so the portal in and of itself is not primarily serving as peer-to-peer or expert-to-expert or user-to-expert connection or interaction tool. There are plenty of other opportunities for that.
Thank you. So far, I see that there are no more questions in the chat. And just for you to inform you, we will publish all the presentations and also the video of this set later on the Regilience website, so you can look up the slides there then. Back to you, Jen.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. So now we go to the next presentation, which is on the playbook on resilience pathway development. And who is going to present here is Philip de White. He's an innovation consultant at Verhart, and he has built up extensive expertise in successfully leading innovative assignments and projects for companies, organizations, and public authorities as well. He has a passion for sustainable innovation and loves making the world a better place. And also we have here Lynn Miko. I'm sorry, my pronunciation. She's a design consultant at Verhart. And please, the floor is yours. I don't know who would like to present, if Philip or Lynn.
I will share the presentation.
Lynn,
okay, thank you, Lynn.
Lynn is going to share the presentation. Thank you for the introduction. And while Lynn is going to present the presentation, thank you all for joining this forum here. I'm very happy to present the playbook on the resilience pathways that we have developed within the consortium of the Transformar team. And a little bit later, I'm going to explain what Transformar is so that everybody understands where we are coming from. It was also interesting for me to have all these previous presentations also regarding the pathway developments, and I hope that we can make it a little bit more tangible with presenting you the playbook that we have developed in our team. Lynn, can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Okay, who are we? I'm Philippe de Witte. I'm innovation consultant at the Verhart company together with Lynn. That's one of my colleagues who was working also at the playbook. But we are working together with the team of Actera, and I think Leo Lenoir, also present here in the meeting. He was also joining together with the Actera team on the playbook development. So what you see here is a joint development of what we did as a company together with the team of Actera, because both we have the knowledge of developing the tool. So it's the co-creation, in fact, of both parties. But also we involved in the development of the tool a lot of stakeholders, so like local stakeholders, governments, researchers that also are present in the Transformar organization. So it was really interesting to see this development as kind of a joint team developing a tool, a very hands-on tool to tackle, in fact, the topic of transformational pathways. So one of the first regions where we tested also the tool was the West Country region. So I'm taking also into account the stakeholders of the West Country regions, because they helped us also a lot with doing the first workshops and the first development of the methodology. Yes, Lynn, you can go to the next slide. So maybe a little bit more information about who are we, and maybe who is Actera here, and maybe Leo, maybe you can unmute yourself and present in short who Actera is and who from your team was developing also on the playbook.
Yes, thank you, Philippe. Hi, everybody. So I'm Leo Lenoir from Actera. That is a French consultancy working on climate change resilience and adaptation in France and in Marseille. I apologize for Mampion and Rakoto Norina and Stéphane Simonet. They are working on Transformar in Guadeloupe today, so they are not able to be with us today. As you can see, we work on many fields of adaptation, from modeling climate change projection to climate vulnerability and risk assessment, climate adaptation strategy and action planning, etc. And we work with Verhart on this tool. to involve to develop tools to study mobilizing and the adaptation pathway approach as a way to plan adaptation under uncertainty. And this is why we joined forces with Transformer project to operationalize and upscale this approach across Europe under this playbook with Verart and demo partners.
Okay, thank you, Leo, for this introduction. I'm also going to introduce also the Verhaert organization. So we are an organization who is mastering, in fact, the innovation process. So we are developing new services, new products, and we are doing that in the methodology of the sweet spot of innovation. So we are tackling technology. We are concerned about the desirability of products and services towards people, but we also want, if we develop an innovation or a new product or service, that this is also in an economical context relevant. And also, I think the whole process of our innovation capabilities are also positioned in the environment. So we are taking the design for planet as kind of a rule for our innovation processes. And if I look to the team where we developed together with the team within Verhaert, and Lynn, you can show the slides. Yes, so we are divided in several labs. So we are joining forces with this design lab where Lynn is coming from. I'm from the innovation lab within the Verhaert organization. And together with the Open Lab, who is more like ecosystem based, we developed the Transformer tool as kind of a team also at the Verhaert slide. So that's a little bit context of the both companies. So maybe a short introduction, what is Transformer? In May 2022. So we have like 22 consortium partners spread over the 12 UE countries, and we are working on 6, and that's quite important. We are working on 6 demonstrator areas where we are trying to test also the tools that we are going to develop. And you see on the screen which kind of regions that are together with us in the Transformer project, where we can demonstrate what we are developing in this project. Yes, Lynn, you can go to the next slide, please. So the next slide is about the transformational pathways, but I don't think we need to really go in depth because the first presentations were already like going into detail. But I want to explain what the playbook is. So in fact, what we have seen in organizing the workshops is that local people, they really need some hands-on information on how to do this climate adaptation. And that's the reason why we developed the playbook. So at the moment, it's an interactive PDF version so that you can find on the website of Transformer. It's very nice and very visual broad. So we try to avoid complexity here, and we try to make the tool as simple as possible for our participants, because this is a barrier for our stakeholders that they need to we need to make, in fact, the things that we want to have as a goal as simple as possible. So it's in fact a help for the workshop moderators to organize and set up a kind of climate adaptation workshop together with the participants in that local area. And on the slide here, you can see also the various regions where we tested already the methodology in Europe. So like I said already, we have these six demonstrators, and they give us also some updates regarding the tools and the development of the tool. Yes, Lynn, you can go to the next slide. I think what is important here, I think we discussed already the transformational adaptation pathways, but what we want to do here also, and what we want to bring in also as a party here, is that we need to make it very visual in a way. So it's like a simplified way to present the adaptation pathways. And here at the left-hand side, you can see kind of very a very easy simplification of how a theoretical transformation model could look like. So, and that's also what we try to do in the workshops that you will see next. So we try to make a transformational adaptation pathway very concrete with the input that we have got from the local regions. Yes, Lynn, you can go to the next slide, please. So has collected all kinds of information about climate adaptation, because it's important for our stakeholders that we get them some introduction in what is climate and adaptation, and that they can find in the playbook a little bit more information about the context. What we also have done, and as Verhaard, we have a lot of experience in steering innovation projects towards the future, towards workable products and services. And we have in fact a whole chapter on how to organize and lead as facilitator a workshop on climate adaptation. So you can find this information also in the playbook. And how we are doing this is we developed a lot of canvases and tools that you can also find in the playbook. You can see it also here on the screen on the second page, that is a little bit like under the first one. But we believe also that we need some tools and canvases to organize these workshops, because it's giving like the workshop moderator a very hands-on and practical step plan to go to, let's say, the end goal of what the climate adaptation strategy could be for a local region. Yes, Lynn, you can go to the next slide, please. So this is a little bit like one of the most important slides of the playbook that we wanted to present here. So it presents, in fact, the methodology that we have developed. So in fact, we have 3 sessions developed in kind of the development of the adaptation pathway. So Lynn is going to present also a little bit more in depth what the 3 sessions are all about. But that's quite of important for the workshop leader to have these 3 sessions and to follow also the process of this methodology. So we have also like a lot of tips and tricks in the playbook, because we have organized already a few of these sessions, and we want to distribute also the learnings that we have into the playbook. So so that's about the workshop methodology and the sessions that we have developed. Yes, Lynn?
Yes, I think maybe I will add over here, or did you want to finish the slide?
Yes, maybe it's just like important to also say maybe a little bit more detail about the 3 sessions. So the first session is all about the priorities of the local stakeholders and identifying the priorities of the local stakeholders. So we did it in a very few sessions, a very important step, in fact, to also talk to the local stakeholders and make it very hands-on and practical, and listen also towards what the priorities are of these local stakeholders. So in the second session, we try to, together with these local stakeholders, what the key risks are and what the impact is that they have on the local region. And then in the third session, we want to determine and prioritize the measures that we want to take, and try to develop also in specific context of this local region. So we want to make it very from the high level point of view, very concrete and detailed for a local region. So that's where the methodology can help with. And I think Lynn, you are going to present also a bit more in detailed some concrete examples and a few examples on how we did certain workshops. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. Well, maybe one thing that I want to mention about the 3 sessions here is that in the second session, we will start with some input from scientists. So they will give more information about the climate challenge and what are some consequences of these climate challenges. So if I can show you one concrete example of the main tool. So this is the main canvas that we will fill in during the 3 sessions. We split it up in 3 parts, so it's easier to just print out and fill in with the participants. But some of these fields are also connected between different sessions. And if we look at a filled in example, I think this one was about tourism. It's just the rough material that's the end result of the 3 sessions, and this still needs to be processed. So how is this done? Well, for each session, there is a conclusion canvas, and the workshop leader or leaders will fill in this conclusion canvas with the input from the session. And we can just zoom in on the conclusion canvas for session 3, as this is the end result of the 3 sessions. So for this conclusion canvas, we will actually construct the adaptation pathways. And I will go quickly through the steps that you have to take to fill this in. And yeah, the information for the first step is just found in the main canvases of the 3 sessions. So on the left side, you will just list some solutions that were developed during the session, some existing solutions that might apply to the climate challenge. And then on the bottom, you can see the percentages. These are the thresholds to indicate whether there's a low impact, a medium impact, a high impact, or a very high impact. So for this one, it's tourism. So if there is 15% or less decrease in tourism, it's a low impact. Between 15 and 25, it's a medium impact, and so on. So after listing this, we will indicate the viability of solutions. So we will determine when the start and the expiry date of each action is. So for example, for the second one, develop better warning systems. You can use this solution starting from the medium impact until the very high impact. After doing this, we will color code the solutions considering feasibility, efficiency, socially acceptable, acceptability, etc. So for the green ones, everything is really feasible, it's efficient, it's acceptable, etc. For the orange ones, it's less feasible or less socially acceptable. And for the red ones, there's at least one thing that's not right. So it's not feasible or it's not socially acceptable. So the next step is actually to really develop those pathways, just to indicate which actions could be taken one, which actions could follow up the other actions, and you can make as many pathways as you want. We have made 2 for this example. And then you actually come to the last step, which is deciding which adaptation pathway you're going to use in your local community. So who can use the playbook? Well, quite a lot of people can benefit from using this playbook, such as researchers and scientists, politicians, companies that are influenced by the climate challenge and want to tackle this, local governments and communities, citizens, but actually any public or private entity with the motivation to do something about this climate challenge can use this playbook. If we look at the planning for the playbook, well, we started with developing the playbook at the start of the Transformar project. Then the first thing we tried with this playbook was the pilot in the demonstrator of the West Country region. This was an online workshop, and with the input from this workshop, we updated and refined the methodology. And we also applied it to the 5 other demonstrators. Afterwards, we again updated. But we also started with developing a web tool. So some parts of the playbook are put in an interactive web tool, which makes it easier to fill in these canvases, keep the sessions online. As you already have the canvases, you just need to put your post-it notes on it, and you can also get a summary at the end. So I think we explained everything about the playbook and the Transformer project, and I just want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Philip and Lynn, for presenting the playbook. It looks like a very interesting tool indeed. But who better than the users, right, to tell us how it is to actually use the playbook? So we would like now to invite two users, Gilles Ricard and also Amaya Soto, to tell us a little bit about their experience using the playbook. So Gilles is a team and project manager at West Country Rivers Trust, UK, and who are demonstrators for Transformar. And the West Country Rivers Trust undertook co-creation adaptation pathways workshops early in the project with key community systems identified around agriculture, water management, and biodiversity. I'm sure Jules will be much better than I am to explain what happened. And also Amaya Soto, who is a project officer at SETMAR, and she participated in this co-creating adaptation pathways with the Galician shellfish gatherers and mussels aquaculture farmers. So let's start with Amaya. Can you please take the floor and see if you can share your screen if you need?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and well, thank you for the introduction and of course for the invitation to participate in this session. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I lost you for a bit, but now I can hear you and I can see the screen as well.
Great. I think it was and you can see my screen. Great.
Yes.
Okay, so we can see my screen. That's it. I'll first introduce a little bit the key community system we are working with. We are in Galicia, in Spain, and which is one of the most important fishing regions in the European Union. And we are developing and testing solutions to drive the adaptation to climate change through a case study aimed at mussel and clam aquaculture sector. It is coordinated by TETMAR with the participation of the University of Vigo and the Institute of Marine Research. So these two community systems are quite important in our region. The mussel culture is about 40% of the European production in more than 3,000 rafts. A raft is this structure that you see and is in the Galician coast. If you travel here, you'll see a lot of them, and directly employs more than 5,000 people. On the other side, clam farming and self-fishing, there are more than 600 farming parks and around 3,500 self-employed shellfish collectors, and most of them women. So in this context, we applied the handbook and the playbook, excuse me, and we follow more or less the 4 steps that they proposed: identifying, planning, implementing, and reporting. And so we first contact and mobilize the key stakeholders representing these key community systems, which is a bit difficult. Sometimes these people is difficult to reach and get aligned opinions and solutions. You can imagine they are fragmented sectors with high number of self-employed workers and some small and medium enterprises, and they work on the sea. So their agenda adapts to weather and tidal conditions, and we have really to set the day and the place to try to gather them all. But we managed to do that, to gather people from the private sector, the NGOs, sectoral associations and guilds, education community, some people from the government, and of course the scientific community. Then we started planning the workshop and organizing how to do it. We saw that we had to combine these three sessions that our colleagues explained before, Philip and Lynn, because it's difficult for them to be 3 days, different days for the meetings. So what we did, and it was very specific of the Galician demonstrator, it was to go to their places. We did 19 bilateral meetings in 2022. You can see here Spain, Galicia, and this is Ria de Arousa, where we are working. So we visit all their headquarters, and we're explaining the objective, and of course also listening to them about their perception of the climate change, the challenges of some of the existing solutions. Then we maintain an online workshop, very brief, and finally in January we combine the 2 of the sessions in a presence workshop. And here we work about the vulnerability, the impacts, and the projections to create these pathways. We coordinate with all the project technical partners to get the climate data and projections, trying also to add some oceanographic variables for the Galician area. How we implement the workshop, we took the handbook as an inspiration, and we used plenty of tools and participatory tools to meet and greet, to get and collect the classified solutions in the canvas. The presence workshop works better for the key community systems we are working with. We also count on an excellent communicator of the Marine Institute to communicate and to transmit the scientific projections. And we also tried some icebreakers, the Slido participatory tool to have some clouds and some close answers and questions, and an agile voting system with colored cards, group discussions, of course, with a dilemma and motivation questions. And we also handed all the information we had in paper for them to be able to work in the workshop and take some notes. And finally, we report and do the satisfaction survey and communicate the lessons learned. The results of these activities and the feasibility of the adaptation solutions, we saw that offer possible useful ideas for adaptation. We get also in some of the conclusions that longer data series are necessary for tailor-made strategies and specific adaptation actions suitable to the sector, specifically for the marine environment. But they constitute a good baseline to guide a more rigorous and systematic and long-term consultation process. So with all the conclusions and the information that we got, we will report it, and we share it with the 26 organizations that collaborated in the exercise, and we are also communicating to some other key stakeholders. Well, finally, the satisfaction survey, we ask about the feedback of the workshop, and people like the dynamic and the organization, the willingness to participate in this kind of debates. They also, I think, they are eager to continue participating. So I think for us it was a very positive tool to use. I tried to do it in 5 minutes. I hope that it was clear for you. If you have any question, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. That was great, Amaya. Let's continue now with the experience from Gilles. Let's see if you can present your screen. If you need, otherwise.
Yeah, so yeah. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I've just got some notes, so I didn't have long, so I thought I'd just go through those. But yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of talk about experiences and things, and the kind of the use and formation of the playbook, and undertaking the co-creation workshops. As I said earlier, it was quite early in the project we undertook these, and also I was quite new to the project as well, so it's quite a steep learning curve, I suppose, but good for me to go through that process as well, along with the stakeholders. I suppose for context, in the West Country region, historically as West Country Risk Trust, we've done a lot of work with stakeholders, so that was kind of a particular strength we were able to bring to that. And we've done a lot of engagement. Often that was through things like catchment partnership groups that we work on, and so we're involved with quite a few of those kind of stakeholders. Our kind of key community systems in the area were around agriculture, water management, and biodiversity. So I think they're the kind of areas where perhaps climate change was most sort of visible. We had quite a few issues of localized flooding in the last few years in particular, and that was the main thing in people's mind. But also, obviously, from the biodiversity side, there was concern around runoff and things from agriculture. So it was important to get those two kind of groups. And really, agriculture probably covers 70%, if not more, of the West Country region. So kind of getting those stakeholders involved was really important to make the change. They're the kind of the landowners. We need them involved as part of it. I think some of the things that are really useful with the kind of the structure and the playbook and having those sessions facilitated was around providing that that structure and being able to give items a format. So we were able to talk about things like exposure, hazards, what the impacts were, what the vulnerability was, and break some of those items down. I think previously in the area, when people were talking about climate change, it was quite sort of it was relatively sort of generic information from a sort of a national point of view, but this helped improve that understanding. I think perhaps the stakeholders had kind of good local knowledge of scenarios and things happening, but they perhaps hadn't thought about it in that structured format, and breaking that down. I think also kind of lessons learned and important things. I think it's really important that the local stakeholders benefit from the workshops and the outcomes. So I think in particular useful things were like the scientific modelling in session 2. That was really useful because that kind of provided more local, regional information on climate change and what was happening. And I think before we tended to get a lot of sort of national data, I suppose. So people were talking about a 1.5 degree increase in temperature. Whereas for the modelling and having that scientific robustness, we're able to talk about the likelihood that perhaps, although we may have the same amount of rainfall in the year and in the region, it's likely we're going to have heavier downpours of rain over a short period and then longer periods of drought afterwards. It was interesting. That's pretty much what happened the following year and the following summer. And also, I think often the stakeholders are often busy and they've got other bits to do. So again, trying to manage them in those sessions, because they can take a lot of time, is important, and that those kind of outcomes are specific to the region and practical and can be implemented. So I think for us, again, a lot of the kind of strategies were not so, they were less specific. So we're talking about perhaps planting trees or, reducing carbon outputs, but they were less, what was missing perhaps is sort of that sort of focused things of what people could do locally and how they manage the land. We're having a big review of sort of policy and government policy at the minute on land use and things like subsidies. So forming part of this was important because we need to provide climate change adaptation in space for biodiversity and water. We also need to produce food. So what are the best locations for that? And again, I think having the right facilitator is important. So someone that's able to coordinate people, manage time, direct people. And also I think having some of that local knowledge, which we could provide, we helped kind of, sort of also coordinate things and help the process and have an understanding of what a lot of the local stakeholders are, the new, or we could sort of quality assure things and what they were saying. So I think and also important to have kind of keep momentum as well between the workshops and also the outputs. So obviously it can take time to produce those outputs, but ensure that it's then done in a fashion that people can then use those outputs. So that the climate change adaptation features or solutions we're looking at. So we looked at particularly things like having wider river or riparian buffer zones to help reduce flooding, capture carbon, reduce pollution, making sure that those come out and can be used. As I said earlier, it was interesting that although we had quite a lot of regional flooding in the last few years, we had the climate change sort of predictions, I suppose, and modelling through the session. And I said about the periods of drought. We had our workshops in the spring, and then literally last summer we had perhaps the worst drought we've had for certainly 30 years anyway. And we've still got low reservoirs and a sort of a hose pipe ban and all sorts, which is kind of unheard of here. And the reservoirs haven't recharged, so it really sharpened the mind for people locally. But it was interesting that most of what was explained was what then occurred. But luckily we've got the kind of the pathways and we're ready to use those. And also we're starting to embed those now locally because we've got things like nutrient neutrality. So we're trying to offset phosphate in catchments which are special areas of conservation. And what we're looking is using those in a smart way with multiple benefits. So we can offset the phosphate, but we can also do those in a way that also has those climate change adaptation benefits, so they can have multiple benefits and use those. But it's an interesting learning experience and something we can use locally at the moment. So that covers it, I think, probably within the time. But happy for any questions.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, both Amaya and Gilles. I'm sure this is very interesting to the participants. And now what we will do, Matthias, we can show this Lido. And then while Matthias is doing that, you can start writing your questions to the speakers of the last two sessions in the Q&A section in Slido. So let's see.
Thank you, Jen. I've seen have already been posted a couple of questions. And one was, I think, posted during the playbook presentation. And will all these tools be available free of charge for the audience? That was one question. Sure if Philippe or
yes, maybe one answer from my side. So at the moment we are developing these tools within the Transformar team. So we have the interactive PDF, but we also are going to have the playbook. But at the moment, I'm not sure what the strategy is of the Transformar team. But I see a few people from the Transformar team also here in the call. Maybe they can better answer the question. Amalie, I see that you also are in the call here, and you're from the Transformer team. Can you answer this question?
If you can raise your hand, then I can unmute you if you like to speak. And maybe I think the second question is also maybe for Philippe or for someone else in the Transformer team. How far is the playbook aligned with the climate adapt tool steps and recommendations?
So at the moment, within the Transformer team, we have a whole bunch of scientific people working on the climate adaptation pathways, and in the development of the methodology, there was a very extensive exchange with all the experts based on the climate adaptation pathways. So that's how we developed, in fact, the methodology in co-creation with the scientific people within the consortium of Transformer. So you could see it also on my slide. So you can see that Transformer is a consortium of different players with the knowledge on this. So, and that was a joint development of all the parties within the consortium.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how is the information about the baseline challenges or climate adaptation status of the region incorporated in the workshops?
Yeah, so that's especially in the second workshop where we are going to tackle the scientific base of the region. So here we are going to look to the baseline, so do kind of a zero measurement of what the situation is at that point, and from there on we try to develop, in fact, the roadmap towards the climate adaptation status. So we are starting from the baseline and then going towards the next steps.
Okay. Oscar from the Transformer wanted to follow up on one of the questions. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So regarding the first question about if this is going to be a free to use tool, obviously Transformer is looking towards developing a set of tools that can be merged into a set of adaptation blocks. Those are going to be the main outcomes of the project, so that others can follow on those learning process. Each tool that we developed can be used within the project and within the demonstrators and follower territories that accompany us. And we will obviously take care of things like intellectual properties so that we are protecting what's generated in the process. And that could lead in the future to some other applications of the same tool. But in the meantime, the main requisite for using these tools will be to have some sort of connection with Transformer, so that people from Behaid, Actara, and FEG ourselves who participated in creating the different tools that lead to the playbook, and especially Behaid, who manufactured the final product of this tool, can decide what's the best outcome for that tool.
Okay, thank you. Then I would go to the next questions, and I think they're more from Amaya or Gilles. And in your experience, how much time is needed for the workshop? And maybe also we could combine it already with the third question of for keeping the momentum for the stakeholders. Do you have specific ideas of or experience how this is best done until the outcomes?
Gilles, maybe it's possible that you, from your experience, what was, I think we had 3 separate, I think more or less half days, but maybe it's good to that Gilles maybe explains a little bit how it works.
Yes, I mean, I think you're right. It depends how, I suppose it depends how the sessions were run. So as were done online at the time, partly because of sort of circumstances and COVID risk at the time. I think probably about 3 hours was enough if you start. I mean, they were quite long online sessions, so I wouldn't go over sort of 3 hours, perhaps 2.5, 3 hours. It's trying to find the balance of getting enough information and not overburdening people. So yeah, I'd keep it to that sort of time. I suppose if you had a combined session, probably one full day, but I think you could just allow enough break and time in there, and for people that are coming to it newer sort of stakeholders, it's quite a lot for them to take on board. So yeah, I think you probably just got to sort of try and manage that and understand it can be a lot for them to take on in one go. So you may have to do sort of cover slightly less than you perhaps wanted to, or be mindful of that. Shall I jump to the other question around momentum?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think the main thing is probably having, once you've undertaken those sessions and you kind of got this sort of slightly more, I suppose, sort of the note form and doing that, and then developing the sort of adaptation pathways and things. I think it's probably just keeping tabs over stakeholders to say that it's perhaps in process, or and then once you've got those developed, either send them out, or perhaps having another shorter session or presentation on those. So we've got kind of say local kind of catchment partnership groups where most of those stakeholders are involved in at various times. So we can kind of present on those. So that gives you a good opportunity. And then I suppose for ourselves, we could keep momentum of most of the stakeholders through the neutrality work and using those kind of adaptation features. So yeah, I think it's just something worth bearing in mind, and ensuring that there's not too much of a gap perhaps between the end of the workshops and getting those pathways out. Even though it does take a bit of time to bring all that together. So yeah, I think hopefully that covers most of that.
Okay, thank you. Amaya, how was your experience with this? How did you organize it?
Regarding time, I guess it depends, of course, of the group of people you are working with, the sector, and if it's online or in presence. I think for us it worked very well to meet most of them, and the most difficult ones to reach in advance and start the dialogue there. And not just to say, okay, we'll do one training session and apply the playbook, but to meet in advance and start with some of the answering some of the questions, and trying to do it as a both ways dialogue, that you have something to tell and to inform about, but you also need to gather the information and to receive it. So of course 3 days will be great, because time is needed to learn about the previous session, to analyze the results, and then to be able to give the feedback. But in our case, it wasn't possible to ask them in 3 months to meet, or in 4 months to meet 3 times, and they have to stop working, and now all this different kind of stakeholders. So we did it a bit online, in presence, and in presence maybe you can stay longer. Even 4 hours is tough, but if you have some breaks and some icebreakers, and you change the participatory tools, it is possible. If it's online, I think it should be shorter. And to keep the momentum, well, is to continue the contact, of course, and there should be something you need to understand what you're working with, and to keep something that is interesting for them, and that it is going to be useful. And from time to time, keep informing about the advances of the project. That's all.
Thank you. And maybe you also want to reply to the next question. Who are the climate experts invited to the session 2 of the playbook, and how is the quality of the given expert information ensured? So how did you deal with it in your case studies?
Case they came from the Marine Institute, the research institutions, university, and also in TEDMAR, the research department, specialized in these issues. So it's people that know very well not only the climate change and what is going on in Galicia, but the sector, and they have publications and so on. And we also were in touch with the Transformar project partners who are working in different projections to see if they have something specific for Galicia.
Yeah, and same for me with using the Transformar partners and their expertise and allowing them to. I suppose that was an advantage of being part of the project. But that's how we could add that element.
Thank you. The last question I see is, how is the aim of the transformation pathway defined? Conformity with the 1.5 degree target, or is there? Philippe, would you like to answer? Or...
Yes, I think that's yeah. Go ahead, Giles.
Oh no, well, I think looking at, I think we were looking at kind of sort of risk from kind of low to high, and then impact low to high as a way of kind of understanding what the paths are and their priority. I think that's perhaps how how we coordinated it, but you may want to add in. So yeah, do you want to add to that, Philippe?
Yes, I think that's of course the part where we need and the second workshop where we need the local scientific people also to assist in what the goal is towards the 1.5 degree, and they can help us of course on a scientific base also with setting this goal. So we developed more like the methodology of the workshops, but I think it's this joint development that makes the tool and the methodology interesting, because you're combining it with the scientific expertise. In our case, it was like within the Transformar team, we have a bunch of scientific people that we can add as resources for setting up this goal of 1.5 degrees, so that they can give the input for that reason. So that's how it's tackled in the methodology. I don't know if that an answer is towards the question from the people here in the setting.
Thank you. I think so. Okay, that's the end of my list of questions, and I will hand back to Jen.
Thank you, Matthias. Well, we are in the end of our session today. I would like to say special thank you to all the speakers. I mean, it was very interesting to hear all of you and all the tools and how the tools can be used or were used in the case of the Transformar tool. And also, I would like to thank the participants for joining us today, because you definitely made the session more interesting with your questions. So that's very valuable for us. Before you leave, we would like just to ask you a few further questions. So it's one of them on the satisfaction. So how do you like this session or not? You can answer on Slido as well. It's just a quick satisfaction survey. And after answering this one, you can also vote for the topics for the second cycle of open training session. So that would be quite nice for us to see, to understand which topics you would like to see here in the coming sessions that we have for the second cycle. And I think that would be all. So thank you all for joining. For me, it was a pleasure to moderate this training, and I hope it was a pleasure for you to watch it as well. So you can see here the Slido. I hope it's showing for everyone. But for me, yes, it was quite interesting to see how Josipa started explaining how to encourage these transformational changes and sharing knowledge and experience on that. And then Lucy and Linda explained the adaptation support tool from Climate Adapt and how important it is. And just a reminder that they are developing the regional adaptation support tool as well to come up in June, I think she said, in the mission portal. And then we had Philip and Lynn explaining the Transformar playbook, and Amaya and Gilles how to use the playbook and the challenges with engaging stakeholders, which I think is a big one. I would vote for this topic for the second cycle, but I don't want to give ideas. So I see we have some people responding. Thank you a lot. Yeah, go, Matthias.
Thank you, and thank you, Jen, for moderating this session. And just to give you a brief outlook on the next session, the next open training session will be in September after the summer, and will focus also on funding opportunities for regions and the upcoming pathway development opportunities. And until then, I thank all the participants also from my side. Wish you a nice day and afternoon.